I wasn't supposed to be home that early. Saturday evenings were usually reserved for whatever I had left over from the week. Errands, drinks with friends, even just driving around with no destination. That night, it was supposed to be beers with Eric after helping him move a few things into storage. But traffic was light, and he bailed early because his kid came down with a fever. So I headed home a little after 8, not bothering to text Clara. I figured I'd surprise her. Maybe we'd order Thai and catch up on that show she always pretended to enjoy for my sake. But the surprise was mine. The house was quiet when I pulled in. Porch light on, curtains mostly drawn, everything in its usual place. Nothing felt off at first. I locked the front door behind me and kicked off my shoes, listening to the faint hum of the dishwasher in the kitchen. The downstairs was empty. Lights were on upstairs. That's when I heard it, voices. One was Clara's, unmistakably. Soft, mid-sentence. The other was deeper, male. Not loud, but comfortable. Familiar, even. I froze halfway up the stairs. I wasn't eavesdropping, not at first. I was just listening. Listening like someone does when they know they're about to hear something that's going to ruin everything. The bathroom door was half open. Steam leaked out like something breathing. Inside, the light was dim and golden, like the scene was lit for an asterisk Macy, not function. I stepped closer. Through the narrow crack, I saw Clara. Her back was to me, her robe tied loosely at the waist, hair damp and tucked behind her ear. She was laughing, not loud, not fake. The kind of laugh she used to save for the end of a long day, when we'd unwind with wine on the couch. Then I saw him. A man stood just behind her, adjusting a towel around his waist like he owned the space. He looked young, late 20s maybe, fit, confident. He wasn't panicking, wasn't scrambling to explain himself. Neither of them were. That was the part that stuck with me. Clara turned her head and spotted me before I could step back. She didn't scream, didn't even flinch. Her expression was cool, controlled, like she'd expected this moment. "Oh," she said, with the kind of tone you'd use if I'd walked in on her brushing her teeth. "This is Jordan, Stacy's cousin. He needed a quick rinse after a soccer match nearby." Long story. Jordan, if that was actually his name, just nodded at me with a polite smile, not even bothering to explain himself. He grabbed something from the counter, a water bottle or a watch, I don't remember, and casually slipped past me down the hall. Clara stayed in the doorway, arms crossed over her robe. I told him he could use the shower. Stacy's house has no hot water, and they're stuck hosting people for the weekend. She paused like she was waiting for me to challenge her. I couldn't. Something about the smoothness of her delivery short-circuited my ability to think. Instead, I mumbled something about needing fresh air and stepped out onto the balcony. The sky was dark. Stars out, faint and cold, like distant witnesses. I leaned on the railing and tried to breathe, but every inhale felt shallow, like my lungs were refusing to cooperate. Inside, I could hear the soft thump of Clara moving around, shutting doors, opening drawers. No urgency, no panic, just routine, like nothing had just happened. And maybe, to her, nothing had. I kept replaying the moment in my head, trying to figure out what bothered me the most. Was it the way she spoke, measured, without stammer or apology? Or the fact that I didn't even know who Stacy's cousin was supposed to be? We'd had dinner with Stacy and her husband a dozen times, and I'd never heard the name Jordan. I stood outside until my fingers went numb. I told myself I was just trying to calm down, to let the logical part of my brain catch up. But the truth was I was scared. Scared of how easily Clara lied. Or maybe it wasn't a lie. Maybe there was some perfectly boring explanation, and I just happened to stumble in at the wrong moment. But the thing is, Clara didn't act like someone caught in a misunderstanding. She acted like someone who had rehearsed the scene in her head. And I hadn't prepared for any of it. When I finally came back inside, she was on the couch, legs tucked under her, reading a magazine she never used to touch. She looked up and smiled. "You okay?" "Yeah." I lied. "Want dinner?" "Not hungry." She nodded and went back to flipping pages. And that was it. No discussion. No follow-up. No questions. Just silence. I sat in the chair across from her, watching the TV play a muted rerun of some show neither of us cared about. My mind wasn't in the room. It was stuck upstairs, trapped in that moment, trying to replay it frame by frame. The towel, the timing, her laugh, everything had felt off. Except her. She had been completely composed. I don't know how long we sat there. Hours, maybe. Eventually, she got up, kissed me lightly on the cheek, and said goodnight. I didn't move. I just nodded and stared ahead, pretending to be engrossed in the silent glow of the screen. Once I was sure she was asleep, I wandered back upstairs. The bathroom was clean. No wet towels. No second toothbrush. The mirror was wiped down and her robe was hung neatly on the hook behind the door. You wouldn't have guessed anyone had even been in there. But something lingered. Not a scent or a physical trace, just a presence. Like the room was holding its breath, waiting for me to leave so it could exhale. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I just lay there, eyes on the ceiling, listening to Clara's even breathing beside me. For the first time in years, I realized I didn't recognize the woman lying next to me. And I had no idea how long that had been true. The next morning, Clara made coffee like nothing had happened. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and sunlight. She hummed an old tune while cracking eggs into a pan. She kissed my cheek when I walked in, same as always, her lips warm and routine. If I hadn't been awake all night staring at the ceiling, I might have believed nothing had shifted. But it had. Everything had. She moved through the room like a ghost of herself, perfect posture, clean robe, casual conversation. There wasn't a hint of hesitation in her voice, no flinch in her body language. It made me feel like I dreamt the whole thing. Like maybe I'd imagined the half-naked man in her hallway. Maybe I was losing it. I forced a smile. Morning. She smiled back. Slept okay. Yeah, I lied. She handed me a cup and I took it even though my stomach was turning. As I watched her stir her coffee, I thought back to the last few weeks. Little things I'd shrugged off started crawling back into my head like insects. There was the work dinner she claimed ran late twice in 1 week. The first time, she came home around midnight. The second, I never heard her come in at all. She'd said she stayed with a colleague who had an early morning flight. I didn't question it. Then there were the sudden password changes. She used to leave her phone face up on the counter, texts buzzing in plain view. Now it was always face down, screen black. Her laptop, once casually open in the kitchen, was now locked up tight like a vault. I told myself it was just her being more careful about privacy, or maybe work had gotten stricter about security. That's what I wanted to believe. And the pictures are pictures. She'd quietly started deleting old posts from social media. A photo of us at the cabin last fall, gone. Our anniversary dinner, that one where she wore the navy dress I loved, gone. I'd asked her about it once, just in passing, and she waved it off, said she was curating her page. That's how she put it. Curating. Like our life was a museum exhibit being dismantled behind my back. I sipped my coffee and studied her face across the table. She looked calm. Too calm. There was no tension in her shoulders, no flicker of unease in her eyes. That confidence, the same one I saw last night, was still there. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't even smug. It was something colder. Like someone who knew the outcome of a game before it started. Any plans today? I asked. She didn't look up from her phone. Yoga. Then maybe brunch with Stacy if she's still in town. I nodded even though her saying if she's still in town made no sense. Stacy lived 20 minutes away. She always had. Clara set her mug down. You okay? Yeah. Just tired. She smiled. Rough week. Something like that. She leaned over and kissed my temple, her hand grazing my shoulder. It was so casual, so polished, I almost forgot to flinch. Almost. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table long after my coffee had gone cold. I stared at the empty seat across from me, wondering how long I'd been blind. Wondering when Clara had slipped through my fingers and become someone else entirely. There were memories that didn't sit right anymore. Like the day I brought her lunch at her office last month. She texted that morning saying she had a long shift, so I thought I'd surprise her favorite salad, a little note tucked inside. But when I got to the building, she met me outside. Didn't let me come in. Said her boss was in a mood, that she couldn't take a proper break, that it was better if I just handed it off quickly. She kissed me goodbye, eyes darting behind her like she was being watched. I remember laughing it off at the time, joking about secret meetings and government conspiracies. But now I replayed the way she snatched the bag, how she never even looked inside to see what I brought. How she didn't walk back into the building until she was sure I was gone. Then there was the phone call I overheard from the hallway 2 weeks ago. She was in the bedroom, voice low but urgent. I told you, not this weekend. He's around. I'll text you. I'd paused outside the door, listening like a thief. When I walked in a minute later, she was sitting on the bed, phone nowhere in sight, smiling like she'd just read something funny. Everything okay? I'd asked. Yeah, she said. Stacy again. She's having guy drama. Wants advice. Stacy. Again. It always came back to Stacy. I stood and walked over to the trash, my half-full cup still in hand. I dumped it and stared at the swirling mess of grounds and eggshells and remnants of another fake morning. I couldn't keep doing this, pretending I didn't see the cracks. I went upstairs and opened the hallway closet where we kept our photo albums. I pulled down the big one, the brown leather one with our initials stamped in gold. It was dusty. We hadn't added anything to it in almost 2 years. Not since the trip to Santa Fe where we stayed at the little bed and breakfast with no Wi-Fi. She called it a reset, a way to unplug and be present with each other. But looking through those pictures now, I saw something different. She wasn't holding my hand in most of them. I wasn't even in some. Just her, smiling at the camera, angled perfectly like she was rehearsing for something else. I turned the pages slower and slower until I reached the back where we used to keep printed out messages and concert tickets. There were fewer than I remembered. Some were missing. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. Just like I knew the Clara who used to press herself into my side during movie nights was no longer here. That afternoon I walked through the house with new eyes. I saw every detail like it was unfamiliar. Her perfume on the dresser. The extra charger in the kitchen drawer. The new scarf that wasn't her color. All of it screamed, someone else has been here. But the worst part? I couldn't even prove it yet. All I had were fragments. Still, it was enough. That night, I didn't ask questions. I didn't bring up Jordan or Stacy or the flinch she tried to hide when I touched her back in the kitchen. I just listened. Watched. Measured her pauses. When she kissed me goodnight, I kept my eyes open. I lay in bed thinking of breadcrumbs, how small they seem, how easy they are to miss until they lead you straight to the edge of a cliff. And I was already standing on it. 3 days later, I found the kind of truth that doesn't need explaining. Clara was gone when I got home, said she was meeting Stacy again. Always Stacy. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want another polished story. I just nodded like I believed her and waited until her car disappeared from the driveway. Then I stepped into the quiet, empty house with the strange comfort of knowing no one was watching me. I wasn't planning on searching. Not at first. I told myself I'd just catch up on some emails, maybe take a nap. But when I walked past the study, I noticed Clara's laptop sitting open on the desk. That alone was strange. She never left her devices unlocked anymore. A few weeks back, she'd installed one of those biometric fingerprint apps, said it was for work compliance. I didn't argue. But this time, the screen glowed with a blinking cursor on a draft email. It wasn't work. It was personal. And the subject line alone made my pulse spike. Last Thursday was perfect. I didn't mean to read it. I really didn't. But my eyes scanned the first line before I could look away. I keep thinking about the way you looked at me when I walked into the hotel lobby in that red blouse. You made me feel like the only person in the world. I can still feel your hands on me, your voice in my ear, how we didn't have to pretend. I stared at the words for a long time. The kind of silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was the sound of something breaking. She never wore red around me. Said it wasn't her color. Said it made her skin look washed out. I believed her. But now I was realizing that maybe it just wasn't for me. I scrolled down slowly as if the damage could be controlled if I read it slowly enough. Every line was worse than the last. The way he complimented her perfume, the way they joked about avoiding being seen, the little details that made it impossible to deny. They weren't just physical. They had nicknames. Inside jokes. References to places I didn't even know she went. I can't stop replaying that night. You were mine, finally. I don't care if it complicates things. I just want more. More. It was all there in asterisk mate, explicit, real. Not some flotation. Not some mistake she could write off. This was something built. Protected, nurtured behind my back. The name on the email wasn't Jordan. It was under some vague alias River_Glass12, but I recognized the writing style from another message I'd seen her typing once during a late work session. I'd asked who she was emailing, and she said it was her boss. Said it was about a proposal due the next morning. No boss signs off with, "I miss you already." I backed away from the desk, my heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon I didn't train for. My legs felt numb, my vision tight at the edges. I thought I might throw up. But I didn't. I just sat down on the floor, back against the wall, and stared straight ahead at nothing. That's when the numbness kicked in. Like my body said, that's enough now. Let's shut it down before you fall apart completely. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even text her. I just sat there in the dim light of a house that no longer felt like home, wondering when exactly she had stopped being my wife. Because she hadn't just cheated on me. She'd moved on from me while standing right next to me. She'd made eye contact across the dinner table and kissed me goodnight while her heart was elsewhere. That kind of betrayal? It doesn't knock on your door and ask for forgiveness. It erases you quietly. One lie at a time. Hours passed. I didn't check the time. The sun dipped behind the trees outside and the house shifted into its evening quiet, the creaks and sighs of walls that had heard everything I hadn't. I found myself thinking about little things. Like the way she stopped asking if I wanted dessert. How she started wearing different perfume to bed, something sharper, floral, not the vanilla scent I used to love. Or how she used to text me goodnight when she traveled, even if we'd spoken that day. That habit had vanished around the same time she stopped calling me babe and started just saying night. These weren't signs. They were billboards. I just hadn't wanted to read them. Eventually, I stood up and walked to the kitchen. Opened the fridge. Closed it again. Nothing felt real enough to eat. I poured a glass of water and dumped it out without drinking. Everything was mechanical. I looked at the clock. 9:24 p.m. She hadn't texted once. I sat on the couch and waited. Not for her. For something else. A reason. A thread I could pull that would make it all make sense. Nothing came. At 10:07, I heard her keys in the lock. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. She came in humming softly, the same way she had that morning. Light on her feet. Hair perfect. She looked relieved. Like someone who had returned from an escape, not a brunch. Hey, she said, dropping her bag on the bench by the door. Did you eat? I shook my head. Not hungry. She kicked off her shoes and walked into the kitchen. Want me to make something? I could throw together a quick pasta. I stared at her. Not with anger. Not even with sadness. Just disbelief. How many nights had she come home like this? How many times had I watched her move around this house like she was still part of it? How many kisses had she given me with someone else's name on her mind? No, I said. I'm good. She looked at me for a beat longer than usual, then nodded and opened the fridge. I watched her hands move, so sure of themselves. Confident. Rehearsed. That was the part that hurt the most. This wasn't her falling apart. This wasn't guilt. This was muscle memory. Later, when she went upstairs to shower, I returned to the study. The email was gone. She'd closed the laptop and deleted the draft. But I'd seen it. I'd seen all I needed. I opened my own laptop and started a new document. Not for her. Not even for the lawyers I hadn't contacted yet. Just for me. To remember what clarity felt like. To make sure I didn't let her convince me I'd imagined it. Because I knew it was coming. The deflections. The half-truths. The tears. The claims of emotional distance, of needing something more, of not meaning for it to happen. I knew the script. I'd seen it play out in movies and friends' divorces. But now I was in it. And I wasn't going to let her write the ending. I typed a single sentence. This was the moment I stopped wondering and started knowing. A few days passed. Clara remained flawless. She cooked dinner one night, salmon, roasted asparagus, lemon zest. Poured wine like we were still us. Played music on her phone, humming softly while she stirred a pan. She never once mentioned the email. Never noticed that I was watching her every move like it might be our last quiet meal. Maybe she thought I hadn't seen it. Or maybe she knew I had and just didn't care. Either way, the silence between us wasn't peace, it was strategy. That's what I kept coming back to, the calculated nature of it all. Her timing, her tone, the way she covered tracks not by denying them, but by never giving me enough to confront. She didn't panic. She planned. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat in the study again. Same chair. Same blank stare into the middle distance. But this time, I opened the filing cabinet beneath the bookshelf, an old piece of furniture neither of us touched much anymore. Most of it was filled with warranty slips, tax returns, forgotten junk. But I was searching for something different now. I don't know why I opened the bottom drawer. I didn't expect to find anything, not really. But when I reached in, I felt something wedged behind the folders. Flat, cold. I pulled it free. It was her old work laptop. She hadn't used it since before the pandemic. I assumed it didn't work anymore. The charger was tangled behind the desk. I plugged it in, waited. After a long pause, the screen flickered to life. No password. That alone made me pause. Clara never left her devices unprotected. But this one, maybe it had been forgotten. Or maybe it had served its purpose and was left behind like a snake's shed skin. I clicked through the files. Nothing in the usual places. No obvious red flags. Just documents, old spreadsheets, some resumes. Then I found a folder called Finances Backup. Inside it, a series of PDFs. Legal-looking. Cold, clean, structured. I opened the first one. It was a draft of an email to a lawyer. Not from a firm we'd used before. The subject line read, "Next steps for formal separation." The email wasn't sent, but it was detailed, naming assets, suggested timing, and a sentence that made my breath catch. Robert is not emotionally well. I don't think he'll contest if we frame this as a mutual decision. He may even prefer to avoid the process altogether. I read it twice, then 3 more times. Emotionally unwell? I kept scrolling. A second document outlined proposed asset divisions. It listed our apartment under Clara's name, sole ownership. Our joint savings account was marked with a notation. Move funds gradually over 60 days to avoid triggering suspicion. There was another folder labeled Apartment Ownership Transfer. Inside, a scanned deed, a fake notarization. She'd been preparing to move the apartment title behind my back. All dated nearly 6 months ago. Then came the statement. A Word doc, 2 pages, titled Personal Statement, Contingency, for Mediation or Legal Use. It read like a monologue from someone preparing a courtroom defense. She painted me as detached, forgetful, moody, said I'd withdrawn, lost interest in the relationship, made her feel abandoned emotionally. She claimed I'd stopped contributing to our life together, that I'd expressed, more than once, that I might just leave someday. I hadn't, not once. This wasn't just betrayal. This was premeditation. I sat back, hands shaking. For the first time since this began, I felt something colder than rage, something deeper than heartbreak. I felt erased. The affair was never the whole story. It wasn't even the point. It was a distraction. The real betrayal was here in spreadsheets and draft emails and forged documents. She hadn't just cheated on me. She'd made plans to disappear me, and I was never supposed to see it. Suddenly, so much made sense. The subtle changes. The softness in her voice when she talked about the future. The way she'd started suggesting that I see a therapist, always framed as loving concern. At the time, it felt like support. Now I saw it for what it was, groundwork. She was building a version of me she could justify leaving. And worse, one she could walk away from legally without consequence. I kept digging, scanning through her folders like a surgeon identifying tumors. It all fit together. The appointment scheduled with a real estate agent. The retainer with a family lawyer. The calendar event labeled simply, Mediation Prep, Week 9. I was never part of that calendar. At some point, I stopped feeling anything. The grief was gone. Anger was hollow. All that remained was clarity. She didn't just fall out of love. She orchestrated my exit. I closed the laptop, gently, like it was something alive. I sat there in the dark, listening to the quiet rhythm of the house. The same house I'd spent years building with her. Painting walls, installing shelves, hosting dinners. All of it now reduced to legal bullet points and asset allocations. I didn't sleep that night. Again. The next morning, Clara moved around the kitchen like always. Perfect. Polished. A woman with no loose ends. I watched her pour coffee, her robe cinched neatly, her hair pulled back in that tidy, effortless way she'd mastered. She looked at me over the rim of her mug and smiled. "What?" she asked, laughing softly. "You're staring." I shook my head. "Just tired." She leaned over and kissed my cheek. "You've been so distracted lately. You sure you're okay?" "Yeah," I said. She paused. "If you ever want to talk about anything, you know that, right?" I nodded. "Thanks." She went back to sipping her coffee. I watched the way her eyes stayed focused, calm. The way she didn't blink too often, didn't fidget. That's how I knew she thought she still had control. She believed the game was still hers to manage. But I knew now. She had spent months preparing to ghost me from my own life. And now she was looking at me like I was the unstable one. So I smiled. "Actually," I said, I might take a drive today. Clear my head a little. She nodded as if that was a good idea. Probably smart. Sometimes it helps to just get space. I finished my coffee and walked to the bedroom, grabbing my keys and a jacket. But instead of leaving, I paused outside the door and listened. I heard her phone buzz. Heard her walk quickly across the kitchen. Her voice was low. Yeah, I think it's working. He hasn't said anything. I don't think he knows. Another pause. Then a laugh, soft, quiet, and real. I know. He's predictable. I left before I could hear the rest. It was a Thursday when she showed up. The sky had been gray all morning, low and swollen with rain, the kind of quiet that turns a house into a waiting room. I had just finished microwaving leftover soup when I heard the knock, 3 short taps, then a pause. Not urgent. Not frantic. Just uncertain. At first, I thought maybe Clara forgot her keys again. That had happened before, her balancing 5 things at once, forgetting the simple stuff. I considered ignoring it just to see what she'd do. But something in the rhythm of the knock made me hesitate. I opened the door slowly and standing there was a teenage girl. Soaking wet, hood down, brown hair plastered to her face. She had a plastic folder clutched to her chest like it was keeping her afloat. Her eyes, green, sharp, familiar, locked onto mine with something between fear and defiance. Are you Robert? My brain caught on her voice, young, steady, slightly shaking. Yeah, I said. Can I help you? She looked around like she was confirming this was the right place. Then she tightened her grip on the folder and stepped forward. My name's Haley, she said. I think I'm your daughter. I didn't speak. Not because I didn't believe her, but because something in me already did. She extended the folder like a peace offering and I took it automatically. Inside were papers, photocopies, old emails, scribbled notes. Right on top was a birth certificate. Under the father section, Robert James Langley. My full name. Typed neatly, unshakable. I ran my thumb over it like it might smear. I don't understand, I said finally. Where's your mom? She looked away. She's not part of this. She never wanted to be. Clara said you didn't either. Clara? My voice cracked on the word. Haley nodded. She told my mom you didn't want to be involved. That you, she swallowed, her eyes flashing, that you called me a mistake. Something in me twisted. A sharp, sudden unraveling of everything I thought I knew. I gestured for her to come in. She hesitated at first, typical teenage wariness, but after a second, she stepped inside. Her shoes squished on the mat. She stood in the hallway like she didn't want to touch anything. Here, I said, leading her into the living room. I grabbed a towel from the bathroom and handed it to her. You're drenched. Sorry, she muttered. No, I just didn't expect any of this. She sat on the edge of the couch, still holding the folder, arms wrapped around it like armor. I sat across from her, trying to piece something coherent together. My mind was running through years, backtracking to before Clara, to names and moments I thought were long behind me. I didn't know, I said quietly. I swear to you, Haley. No one told me. That's what I figured, she said, softer now. Once I started digging, things didn't add up. My mom wouldn't talk about it. I found the documents on my own. There were emails, a few old photos. And one letter. Clara's name was all over it. She told my mom she'd handle the conversation with you. That she didn't want me growing up in chaos. That word hit harder than she probably meant it to. I was a kid, she said. But I remember Clara. She came by a few times. Gave my mom money. Told her you'd moved on. That you wanted a clean slate. My stomach dropped. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, trying to catch up to a version of my life I never lived. I tried to picture Haley as a baby, as a toddler, as anything other than the half-soaked teenager sitting across from me now. You said she gave your mom money? Yeah. Not much. Just enough that she'd stop asking questions. And your mom? She shut down. Every time I brought it up, she'd say, it doesn't matter anymore. I think Clara scared her. Or maybe she just didn't want to believe the truth herself. I sat back, my eyes scanning the folder again. There were receipts, email printouts, even a typed timeline, a list of interactions between Clara and Haley's mom, each one shorter and colder than the last. It was all there. Another part of Clara's architecture. Another life she buried. I don't even know what to say, I finally muttered. You don't have to say anything, she said. I just wanted to meet you. That's all. I looked at her for a long time. The shape of her face. The way her eyes squinted slightly when she wasn't sure she trusted someone. It was like looking through a foggy mirror. I saw traces of myself I hadn't noticed in years. You hungry? I asked. She blinked. What? Food. I've got soup. It's not great, but it's warm. A pause. Then a small shrug. Sure. We sat in silence at the kitchen table, her spoon tapping gently against the bowl. I watched her eat like I was trying to memorize her, file away every detail in case this moment evaporated. "Can I ask you something?" she said between bites. "Anything." "Why did Clara do it?" I took a breath. Let it out slowly. "I don't know. But from what I've learned lately, she doesn't just lie to get what she wants. She lies to control the story. She rewrites it before anyone else can." Haley nodded, like that confirmed something she'd already suspected. "You know what's weird?" she said. "I thought I'd be more angry. But mostly I just feel sad. Like I missed out on something I didn't even know I had." "Me too," I said. We sat there for a long while. Eventually she asked about my job and I asked about her school. We traded small things, safe things. She told me she liked photography. I told her I used to develop film in college. She smiled at that. It was the first real smile I'd seen on her. Later, I offered to drive her home, but she hesitated. "I don't want to go back yet." "You got somewhere else to stay?" She shook her head. "You can stay here," I said, before I even fully realized what I was offering. "Are you sure?" "Yeah. I mean, only if you're comfortable." She gave a tiny nod. "Just for a night." One night, I agreed. I set up the guest room. Clean sheets. An extra blanket. She stood in the doorway, looking smaller now. "If you want to talk more tomorrow," I said, "I'm around." "Thanks." She paused. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you." She smiled again, smaller this time, and closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a long time after. The house was quiet in a new way. Not lonely. Not hollow. Just different. I didn't text Clara. I didn't confront her. Because this wasn't just about the affair anymore. Or the lies. Or even the manipulation. This was about all the pieces of my life she'd tried to remove. All the branches she'd snapped off to shape the perfect version of her future. But Haley? She was a piece that refused to disappear. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something new. Not closure. Not revenge. Just truth. And the faintest flicker of something like hope.